Hi, this is Teresa Bruno on the Soul Talks podcast with my very dear friend Natalia LePivert today. We left you last week closing out a segment on shame and shame naturally leading into a topic we both love to talk about, and that's the topic of courage. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Hey,
Hello.
it's so nice to see you.
I know. Nice to see you too.
Nice to be here with you today.
I think it's like shame is a little heavy, so it's nice to change to something a little bit more uplifting and talk about courage.
Yeah.
Which is it's when it starts to feel like things are, getting better. So what if you had to look back and talk about what's been the most courageous moment in
It's
this
still
journey?
heavy. If I answer that honestly, it's a really heavy story. I can tell you how I feel about courage today.
Okay.
Oh, I'll lead with that and then give me a minute because you always ask me the hardest questions. It takes courage for me to do this. Like I have fear around opening up, certainly on a platform that is a social platform.
Yep.
So it takes incredible courage for me to be in this place and to do this. But you and I have talked so much about this, and I don't know if this is a real definition of courage, but I feel like courage is when you have fear. I have fear, but you act anyway. So that's kind of how I've run with courage in my survival journey, is that I have very seldom had, balls to the wall courage. Oh, I got this. I can handle it. It's really been more, I've got fear still, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. Okay. I can answer your question of a moment ago. I think the hardest thing I've had to do in this last 3.5, 4-year journey, the hardest thing I've been called to do happened just within a few hours after James died. And if you had asked me just the day before, Teresa, if I said to you, you're going to go through this, your husband's going to die, and it's going to be in a very tragic way, he's going to take his life, could you sit outside his office for 5 hours and wait and wait and wait and wait while the police and the coroners worked with his body? Wow. And at this, I think whenever we are hit with huge tragedy all at one time like that, the thing that happened in my mind in those 5 hours of waiting was there's this ocean that has just unfolded in front of me of everything I don't know how to deal with. And it's just rolling out. And yet, I knew in those hours that everything I did next was so important, especially where my children were concerned. And I will say about that, in my personal experience, and I don't know how others feel about this, it's the most tragic, most shocking thing I've ever been through, and shock certainly plays a role. But I felt like in those first hours, being called to have courage to wait and to gather myself and almost call no one, because I didn't want anyone getting to my children before I could get to them. It was almost as though I was given an extraordinary grace. The courage came. Now later, a week or so later, courage plummeted for a long time. But that was probably the most courageous thing I've been called to do.
Yeah, I can't even imagine like having to sit there when you know what's going on and you're having to wait with no answers.
No answers.
And that, yeah.
No
and
answers.
And I like how you said it's like you were giving this extraordinary grace, right? It's the things that we feel like we're not able to do, somehow when we are faced with it, we find this like superpower to get through it. Yeah. And we don't know how we're doing it,
Well, I think we are spiritual creatures, regardless of what your belief system is. I'm a Christian. I have a very strong belief in a higher being. And my whole life has been ups and downs of questioning, why am I here? What is God? How do I sit in the universe? I've had all that. But that kind of just ingrained spirituality is a part of me. So that prayerfulness has always been a part too. But I really believe that we are all given extraordinary grace in the face of tragedy. And then we build our courage out of that. So if I were to turn it to you and say, tell me about the courageous, maybe not the courageous things that have happened, but the courage that's bubbled up.
I think mine started when I was sick. When I got sick, it was like, instead of just accepting, hey, I'm sick, this is how it's going to be, like having the courage to be like, no, I have to figure out how to have like a better quality of life, or because I didn't know what that was going to look like, right? So I didn't know what I had. I also didn't know what the consequences were going to be. So it was all a complete unknown and uncertain.
Exactly.
So I think in that moment, it was like that moment when I look at myself in the mirror, it was like, I have to have the courage to like get up, even if I don't feel good. I gotta get dressed and I gotta figure out how to make myself feel somewhat better.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be just like, hey, I gotta like wash my hair today because I don't have the energy for it. It could be like, hey, I am actually going to try to get out of the house and go for a walk. It could be anything. And for me, it was those little steps, and then really build. It was a fight or flight courage for sure. It wasn't like this very like, oh yeah, I'm so courageous. No, it was like a instinct of like, I have to figure out how to survive this situation. And it just built just a mentality, I guess, of now when things happen, I'm like, okay, I've been through quite a few things.
Well,
I
it's
think.
kind of like you said to
Yeah.
me, when I said, oh, Natalia, I don't know if I can do this thing. I don't know if I can put myself out there. I don't know if I'm ready. And you're like, Teresa, you've already been maligned on social media. It's all been thrown at you. What else can happen? Just do it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, no matter what, like, we're going, like, people are judging us or doing whatever, regardless of what you do. They might not judge you for this. There's somebody out there that's judging the color of your shirt or something. Like, at the end of the day, who cares? Like, if this is gonna make you feel good and, like, help you feel like you're fulfilling a purpose and you not hurting anybody in the process, why not? Why not do it? But courage, I think courage, the biggest courage is to take the first step.
Absolutely.
Because the first step is always the scariest one, right? Even when we decided to do this, and we've had so many conversations, and we're trying to be perfect to do it. And we're like, you know what? No, let's just figure out how to do it. It's not going to be
Just plunge.
perfect. But why not? And having the courage to just ignore that sense of that instinct of trying to be perfect in everybody else's eyes, and just do one thing at a time and then figure out in the process. It's so big. Like, you never, like, your life is always going to be full of uncertainty.
Absolutely. And I would say, and I keep going back to this with each of our topics. I hear myself doing it, but I didn't know I would, especially with shame, even and some with guilt. A couple of just surefire things for me that always work, no matter what. It's human connection. It's those times when I begin to share a little bit, or even if I didn't, and somebody comes along who does something that inspires me, and I go, oh, well, you've had it really rough and you're doing this. I'm going to take from your courage. It's just like sharing
It's
pain.
almost like you're borrowing a little bit of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You pull a little bit from those who are around you who are doing very courageous things. And I have to give credit to my kids. In my journey, I thought I had to, really stand up and look strong and not let them know how I was suffering. And I kind of did that for a long time. And then there was a point at which I think one of them said, let's just talk about this. This is not, and we got very real with our pain, the three of us. And I began to be able to understand what each of them were going through. But I've taken so much courage from those boys and how they've gone on with their lives. And I've watched them hurt and cry and not know how to put it back together, but to do it anyway, just to kind of keep moving forward. And so those kids have built my courage, and they've, they said, Mom, go for it. Mom, do these things because you deserve to live again. You deserve to be happy again. But I've taken great courage from others around me.
And I love that you're saying that, because it's like when you watch somebody, like if you have an idea of doing something, but you don't know if it can be done, and you see somebody else doing, you know it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see somebody having the courage to move on, it's like, okay, if that person went through all this and they are now in a better place, they're living the life, they acknowledge what happened, but they're doing it, I'm going to take this as inspiration and I'm going to figure out how to apply that to me. And you see it in little things. I think it's, if you ever see someone that has gone through what you went through, it's like, I bet people, you were thinking you were like this hot mess. And I bet there were people that were like, oh my gosh, she's still running her business. She's still taking care of her kids. You're not seeing it, but people that were surrounding you, like your employees at the time, they probably like, oh my God, she's still coming. She's still taking care of the business. She's still showing up for us. They probably recognize your courage at the moment more than you did.
That's an absolute truth. And I think it was easier in the beginning to have courage for others, for my kids, for my employees, for my sister. It was easier to do things that made them not worry about me, to have courage to take steps. But in fact, those steps, it's just like you put a little paint on the wall and you put a little more paint and you put a little more paint. And then, you can really see it. Even if I was doing it for somebody else, it still built, strength inside of me. I've really learned to wrestle with fear in a way that I had never faced fear. The loss of the business, having to get back out in community, so much shame as a woman for not being able to keep that beloved business. And then, so much shame and uncertainty, just almost feeling like I couldn't let anybody touch me after my husband's death, stuff I couldn't even explain. Yeah. But I've learned to really wrestle both sides of fear in ways I never thought life would call me to. But I have to say, I'm so much less afraid these days of just about anything than I've ever been before. Is that courage? I'm not sure. But at least I'm looking at the fear going, okay, I might be afraid, but I'm going to act anyway.
I know, I totally relate to that, because I'm like, things will happen. I'm like, it's probably going to, like, it might end up bad, it might end up good. I'm just going to wing it. I'm going to figure out how it's going to go. Instead of like not like overthinking. I used to be like big overthinker, and I would like get so much anxiety from like making decisions, because I was so afraid of like, having to manage my own life and figuring certain things out, and like, do I move? Do I not? Do I do this? Do I, like, every time I had to make a big decision, like I didn't have anybody to discuss with. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. What's the worst going to happen? I'm going to make another mistake. Well, I'm going to figure out how to fix that one if I do. Mm-hmm. So like just facing it, I think the fear just becomes so much bigger when you can't face it.
Absolutely. And they're tools. There are things that people have taught me along the way that are really profound tools that I use every day. I've always been meditative, but I've really learned a practice of meditation in these last years. I've learned breathing practices, though I always had a little bit of it. Now it's an everyday practice to calm those fears, to calm the anxieties, to get as prayerful and as positive as I can within myself to overcome the fear, to have courage to step. But there are so many times, just the smallest thing, walking in a room with people I don't know and seeing a whisper. Like just recently, I went to a party, and I'm 3.5 years out, and that probably was the first party I've been to in my community where I knew people. And I got to tell you, I was pulling myself up by the bootstraps to make myself walk through the door. And I didn't know how it would go, and there was some of both. There were people who were warm and welcoming, and then there were people where I could see the talks. But it didn't get me down. I didn't really take it in. I went, if you need to whisper about me or my situation, it's okay, because I know it's a situation people talk about a lot. But it didn't sap from me now like it would have. I would have run and hid and cried, a few years ago. And so I guess it's those little things, and they're not comfortable. Courage, I don't think, is comfortable very many times. But I'm learning to draw from all those little things, and I certainly draw from the strength of everybody around me. I think that's really my courage builder.
I like that you said it's like it's not comfortable. The comfortable, it's to like run away from those situations, right? Like we talked about weeks ago about how it's much easier to like quit, right? You could be like, I'm not going to the party because I might see people talking about me. If you had stayed at home, you would just have this monster in your head, right, consuming you, and like now you went, you faced it. You know the people that were warming and welcoming towards you, and they were happy to see you after all this time, and that you were doing okay, and they're happy for you. And you know the people that were talking and they were gossiping for whatever reason. Now you can see it, and you know what you're dealing with.
There was this sweet woman, just precious woman. I've known her for a very long time, and she's very social and she's very active in our town, and she's a tiny little thing, and I just didn't know how anybody would receive me. And I was sort of standing there alone and kind of waiting, where do I move in this crowd? And she came over to me, and, it's things like, it's so small, but it's the things I hope I learned to give. She just walked up to me and she took both of my hands. And there was something in that action. It's so simple, but she just took both of my hands, and it was like she didn't hug me, but she made me safe for a minute. She looked me right in my eyes and she said, Teresa, where have you been? We've missed you.
And it's like so simple, right?
And those are the things I hope we give out, that on our journeys of survival, coming out of really tough things, that we learn truly how to give back, because you see suffering everywhere.
Yeah. And I think it's like what she did, she reminded you that like you loved, you missed, and yes, all of this happened, but like you were missed.
Oh, it was a profound moment for me, for that little woman to come up and just take my hands like that. And I thought, let me give that sometime. Let me pay that forward.
No, and I think that's the thing. Like if you stay home, you're not going to be able to experience those precious moments. So like life is going to continue. And if you choose to stay in the secrecy and the silence and shame and all these different spaces, you are going to stop experiencing life to its fullest, to have joy again, to have love again. And it's just so heavy to just stay on those places all the time. And it's hard to have courage every day. Some days it sucks. But I just, like some days I'm like, do I really want to get out of bed? Like I just want to sleep all day. But like I've learned that it's like not good for me. I've learned to kind of balance it out. When do I have to have time alone and when I don't? That I have to push myself out because I can get really comfortable being alone. But I also work a job where I give so much, and I'm talking to people and I'm listening to their stories and what's going on with their lives, and like giving so much of that, similar to like what you shared, that I'm like, I need time alone so I can make sure I'm okay. What do I need? Like that takes courage for me, because I think it's easy for me to mask sometimes, like how I'm feeling and the things that I'm dealing with, and just get busy. And if for me, and it's so funny, like we respond so differently, right? I need to be alone. for like, I think it's just like how I process things. It's like I have to be on my own for a little bit, not all the time, and just process what's happening, and then take the courage to take the steps. Do I need to work less hours? Do I need to make this adjustment? Do I need to go out more? Do I need to be more social? And I've had to like, and we've talked about this, adjust things in my life recently where I was like, I was putting too much at work and it was affecting me. So I needed to make changes. But my courage is that I'm willing to look at myself and be like, you're not doing this
That's
right.
beautiful. Your
Like,
courage.
you're not doing this right.
Your courage is that you are willing to look at yourself. And I think one of the words we haven't used very much in our talks, and again, it's connected to Brene Brown and how she talks us through shame into courage, but the link there is vulnerability.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a very hard thing for me, but as I've said to you, the shifts that I see in myself over the last 4.5 years, I mean, I just feel like I am arms spread wide open, and I'm learning to tell that story. I'm learning to lay it out. I'm learning to cry in public. But that vulnerability, you know, then leads me into, okay, I did it. It wasn't so hard. Now I've got courage for the next thing. And I feel like I hear you saying some of the same thing.
Yeah. And it is because like, even like, if you don't face it and become vulnerable, the monster of the fear just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you have to stop. You're the only person that has the control to stop it. That's the thing. If you don't act, you can't stop that.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like, I feel like every day I wake up and I'm gonna kind of like process things really quick in the morning. Okay, I got this. This is what my day is gonna look like. And that's how I want to show up for myself today. That's how I want to show up for people. And some days you might be tired or there's something going on. You might have something in your mind. It's just you're going to be there at the end of the day. Like when I go to work and I'm going to be around people, I don't want to be that person that's carrying that burden. It's okay for me to leave it aside. And I've learned to have the courage to separate those things and just be able to face one thing at a time and acknowledge my feelings in the process. And if I need to like cry and be like, okay, I don't feel good today, but I'm still gonna move on. I gotta do it.
But you know, I don't know why this struck me right here at this moment, but there is so much pain in the world and with every person. And I don't feel like my story's particularly unique. And I like to always say, you know, I'm not an expert on any of these topics. I'm just a woman with a journey, and I'm willing to share it in hopes that it will help somebody else in their path out. But you know, we as a country, as a world, are going through so much collective pain, so much uncertainty right now, between the pandemic and wars, and you know, I think the polarization of our democracy and things like that. I mean, we're all carrying this big thing that we're all bouncing off of each other about, much less all of our individual sufferings.
There's all this stuff going on at the same time you're going to your own stuff. Like, you have to be able to keep moving with your stuff because you have all these things coming at you at the same time. Like, you're going to have all these problems that are going in your city, with your family, with your friends, at work, with wars and all that stuff. And you have to have the courage to move on with your life and do the things you need to do for yourself, because otherwise you don't even have time to breathe, because it's not stopping. You don't only have this one situation that you're fighting. There's all these other things that are coming at you. You gotta get up and feel like, I'm gonna do at least the basics to like get myself to move forward. And it might be a little bit this today, and it might be a little bit more tomorrow, or you might only be able to like get up and do the very bare minimum, and it's still courage for you.
Yeah. There's somebody I listen to a lot. I think she's just one of the greatest thought motivators in our world today. Her name's Krista Tippett, and she used to have a show on NPR called On Being, and that's morphed into some other things. But she has this phrase that it's is a little wobbly in my world because I'm not nearly as smart as she is, but she talks about all the collective pain and our individual pain and suffering, and how easy it is for us, because of the way the news is delivered, because of the way we tend to take stories of pain, that it's really easy to always see it in a negative direction. But she says there's a generative narrative happening in our world. And I love what she's trying to weave in there, saying, don't just see all the negatives, see all the good that's going to wrap out of this. Just like you always say, share your pain, you lessen the power. You've got wisdom in your own pain. There's beauty in it. But it takes so much courage from hearing other people talk about, don't settle in it. Don't only see the suffering, see the good, collectively or individually, what bubbles up in the world when you latch on to little bits of hope and courage.
You know what? It takes a lot of courage. I was like listening to you talking about the news. It's to cut off things that are not good for you.
Absolutely.
Like, so when you're trying to move on to things, there's always the stuff you got to let go. And it takes courage because sometimes it might be people.
Yeah.
It might be things.
The people who aren't good for you.
Right.
The social media that you need to get away from because you judge yourself because of it.
So you have to have the courage to look at yourself like, what is it good? Just because it's been in your life for a while, or it's been part of your routine for a long time, or it's been your day, whatever that is, you have to look at it with courage and be like, this is not serving me well anymore. And for me to be able to move on from where I am, I have to change this.
I think that's such a powerful point you're making. It's having courage, and it's to make change. It's having courage to say, as you said, this no longer serves me. This is no longer good for me. I completely got off of social media, when everything happened to me. I don't think it was particularly courageous. It was that I couldn't handle the negativities that were coming at me. To this day, still, I have a really hard time watching the news. I can watch in little bits, but then I'm like, whoo, that's taking me down a path I can't handle.
I can't watch it either. I actually don't. I don't watch it at all.
It's not that I'm running away from world events. I can read it more than I can watch it.
I stopped watching the news when it was COVID because it gave me so much anxiety, because they kept saying people that had autoimmune disease had a higher risk. So I was super nervous to get out of the house. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I kept checking all the time, and it was consuming me so much. I had to stop. And I don't really watch TV.
But I think that's a powerful tool, a powerful thing that you've said that gives hope is let go of the things that don't serve you. Have the courage to cut off the people or whatever it is that aren't helping you get through your survival journey.
When we talked about being attached to things, right? And it takes courage for you to change how you view the material stuff.
Absolutely.
Right? For you to shift what you see it as success or not. It takes courage because you got to let go of all these things. I don't know if it's a big house or clothes or whatever that is. And I think people a lot of times are the ones that are the hardest that we, in terms of letting go.
I'll tell you a story that happened to me. I can't remember how many years ago it was. It was the first time I went to India, and I went to India on a philanthropic journey through the YWCA to try to look at some of their programs in the state of women and girls in India, see where the American YWCAs could help, that sort of thing. And so I went there by myself, and I was going to meet up with other people ultimately, but it's a long journey as a woman alone. And I landed in the airport in Mumbai in the middle of the night. My luggage wasn't there. My cell phone did not work. I was so exhausted for how long it took to get there. And I literally, I remember the luggage rack, stopped going. My luggage wasn't there. I'm looking at my cell phone going, I don't know how to get out of this. And I sat down and I put my back against that thing, And I just started to cry. And I was like, Teresa, you are here in India to help women and girls who they don't even understand the privilege you've come from. You know, they don't even understand. And you can't deal with the loss of a cell phone and some luggage. You know, get yourself up and figure this out. And I did manage to figure out the cell phone thing, and I did ultimately get my luggage. But it was the middle of the night, and I found I was supposed to have a driver there waiting. Of course, the driver's not there waiting. You know, it was like complete debacle. But I did finally get somebody who could figure out where I was trying to go. And as I was walking out, you know, and I had not been to India. I'd been to other countries. But as I was walking out the door in the middle of the night, I you know, your senses kind of come to life. And I could smell India. Oh, and I don't just mean food. I mean, I could smell poverty. I could smell struggle and need. And because there's this huge, big slum city right outside of the airport, and I didn't know
the
that.
sewage, that you can smell it. I know
But,
exactly, yeah.
you know, I'm coming out, I'm all, you know, thinking about myself. I don't have any luggage. How am I going to get there? You know, and all of a sudden I was just hit in the face with that. And then as I was getting in this car, and I mean, I was so exhausted, I couldn't string sentences together. I was suddenly aware of somebody right, you know, just right by me. And I turned around, and there was this very young girl. I don't know, she might have been 14, you know, obviously an extremely tattered, poor sari wrapped around her, of course, with a little bitty baby, you know, on her chest. And she was asking for money. And I looked in that young girl's eyes and I thought, okay, this is redefining for me so many ways that my life has been defined. I saw so much beauty in that 1 minute, in that young girl pleading for money with that little baby. And that scene repeated itself over and over 1,000 times in the month I was there. But that was one of the shocking places in life, one of the most shocking places in life, where everything I believed or how I defined beauty and courage got twisted, you know, and I had to really go, oh man, this is life, this is raw, and this is good.
I was like, when you started seeing your story, I was like laughing because that happened to me when I first got to LA. And it was like same thing, cell phone, luggage. I missed a train. It was like a disaster, right?
And the aloneness.
Yes, and they don't have anybody, right? But it, like, when you go, and I grew up in Brazil, which is poor, but I didn't, you know, you see the contrast all the way. But when I was in Asia, you see, it gives you so much perspective when you're in a different place. Like Brazil is like, I grew up there, so like, even though I know it's there, it was hard for me to see it because it was my normal.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was in Asia, the people are so kind and so generous, even though they don't have a lot. And you see how they do things. So like sometimes when like you think about your problems, okay, I don't have my luggage, but like, do you really like, there's so many other problems that you need really to be courageous than like having to figure out how to change a tire, how to like get clothes, like there's so much more. So being able to look at those things, and when you're facing a problem, is like, is this really that big of a deal, or do I have what it takes to deal with this?
And I have to say, you know, I've been fortunate enough to travel and do some, not me do the philanthropic work, but just be a vehicle and see some really tough things in the world. And in these years, I think it was such a gift in my life. I had those experiences before these horrible, destructive times in my life, because I've thought back, you know, about that young girl and so many women in Italy, I'm in your world, in India, and I can remember just being jaw dropped at how courageous they were, living tough lives, doing hard manual labor in the streets, wearing these beautiful saris. You know, again, I felt the joy of, I was around more women than men in my journey there. I was profoundly impacted by the courage of those women in the toughest of circumstances. And many times when I've been reflective over the last years, and I still have on my phone so many photographs, portraits like I took of women and girls there. And I'll look at them and I go, that's courage redefined for me.
And I mean, it doesn't take away from the pain of like other people, but it's so different, right? Because like they're going through something that's very outside of our reality, but it definitely puts things in perspective. And I think everybody in their own world, in their own ways, it requires courage from everyone, not just women, men too, but it requires of everyone. And having empathy helps to understand other people's when they're struggling, and being able to move every day. It's like taking one challenge at a time, and it's like knowing that it's never going to stop. I don't think you ever get to a point where like nothing is going to happen. It's always, you might go through more difficult phases than others, but it's a cycle. It's like it doesn't stop.
So if you are looking at your life right now and looking forward, however far forward you want to look, what is the most courageous thing life is calling you to right now?
I think this is it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not because I have a problem talking about, because I don't. I think it's just like, it's like right now I'm in a place where like I'm just, everything is like pretty steady. So like jumping into something new, it takes courage, because it's very easy to stay where you know what's coming.
Safety always wins, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's like right now it's pretty safe, right? So like, but I've learned to like embrace the like kind of challenge. I want it, because I've learned to appreciate what it does for me. Like in a sense of like, I know like even if something goes wrong, I'm going to learn something, and I'm going to come out of this with something. So no matter what, I'm coming with a mindset that I'm winning. Like it doesn't matter the outcome. Cool. Like if everything falls apart, I know I'm still going to come with something. Maybe not what I initially thought it would come out, but something is going to come out of it.
Oh, I love that thought. And it's back to that thing of how did you grow from it? Or I love that you said, no matter what happens, I'm winning by doing it, by going forward. That gives me courage. So what a great conversation we've had today about all kinds of ways that we've experienced courage through seeing the lives of others who give us courage, through trying to pull our own selves up from the bootstraps, in our survival journey. And thank you. And you know what I want to say, I guess, at the end of this, yes, I take so much courage from all the women that I've been exposed to in my life, people who have worked for me, philanthropic efforts I've been on. I have taken bits of my courage I have today from every one of those. And I'm so grateful for you. I take so much courage from you.
Thank you. Same. I am so grateful for this, and that we've kind of came along from very different places, and somehow we ended up together, and it's still having so much in common, and being able to have this where we can just very vulnerable support each other in this like courage and this journey, and just being able to really find purpose with everything that happened to us.
Well, thank you for giving me the courage to do this, to come forward with my story and you sharing your story. And thank you for listening today. We'll be back next week with a new podcast.